Brother Jones, would you lead us in a word of prayer?
Yes. Father God, we just come to you now in the precious name of the Lord Jesus Christ. We love you and praise you. Thank you for your love and your grace. And Lord, we thank you and praise you for these men, these women who have served our country. And Lord, we ask you to just bless them today in a very special way and be with them, be with their families. And Lord, those that were not able to come home, Lord, we ask you to be with their families as well in this day. But Lord, we just love you and praise you and thank you for the freedom that we have in America because of men and women that are willing to fight and stand. And Lord, we ask you to just bless this time and forgive us now when we fail. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Bill, would you lead us in the pledge?
I guess I'm covered. Open my
Wow.
mind. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just a little, go ahead, just a little bit of information for you. The internet's awesome sometimes. It can get you in trouble too. But November the 11th, 1919, President Wilson issued an Armistice Day proclamation in reference to the agreement made earlier the year before to end the war between the Allies and Germany in World War I. Congress officially declared Armistice Day a federal holiday in 1938. In 1954, President Eisenhower signed legislation that officially changed the name to Veterans Day, making the holiday more inclusive of veterans who had served after and prior to the First World War. Recognize some of the people that we have here. We have Rich Chamberlain, who served as a commissioner here for a number of years and finally had enough of it and retired last year. Casey Jones, the judge of the 411th, is here. Judge Page is here. My name is Travis Kitchens, if you don't know, but I think most people sort of know who I am. We have Commissioner Truss over here and his lovely wife. So we've got a pretty good crew of people here. The Trinity County Commissioners Court this last week signed a proclamation, and Judge Page, if you want to come forward, please. Sure. Who is also here, by the way.
It was an honor to do that Friday, and I appreciate your efforts in putting this event together. And hopefully, I thought about this as I went to get this from my office proclamation. I hope y'all can see this is a photograph of the courthouse from 1945. And that's a Thanksgiving celebration honoring Trinity County services. Look at the yard is covered up with people. That's the way it ought to be today.
That's right.
That's the way it ought to be today.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I thought that was pretty cool. So, resolution in honor of Veterans Day. Whereas since the birth of our nation, American patriots have stepped forward to serve our country and defend our way of life. And whereas with honor and distinction, generations of servicemen and women have taken up arms to win our independence, preserve our union, and secure our freedom. And whereas our veterans are brave and selfless individuals who, when duty called, willingly put themselves in harm's way to defend the lives and liberties of others. And whereas their abiding patriotism and enduring devotion to the ideals on which the United States was founded can never fail to inspire us. And whereas on Veterans Day, our nation comes together to honor our veterans and commemorate the legacy of profound service and sacrifice they have upheld in pursuit of a more perfect union. And whereas serving as teachers, engineers, government employees, parents, and in other important capacities, these patriots have made contributions to civilian life that serve as a testament to their dedication to the welfare of our country. And whereas on November 11th, we are reminded of our solemn obligation to serve our veterans as well as they have served us. And whereas it was proclaimed in the first Veterans Day proclamation issued by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, in order to ensure proper and widespread observance of this anniversary, all veterans, veterans organizations, and the entire citizenry will wish to join hands in the common purpose. Now therefore be it resolved by the Commissioners Court of Trinity County, Texas, that all citizens join together to observe Veterans Day on November 11th and to honor these special men and women who have served our country. Thank you.
We have a special guest today, Dan Barnes, who has done great research and has continued to do great research on veterans. I started this project about a year ago and got Commissioners Court to approve it, and hopefully they will do a resolution to make this permanent so that whenever I leave, this will remain forever in the county. And that was some concern some of the veterans have voiced to me about this. Trying to get veterans to talk about themselves or to get information from them is about like trying to pull teeth out of a wild hog, I guess. My dad was a veteran and served and retired as lieutenant colonel, and he never talked about his missions. He never talked about anything he had done in the military. And that's just part of what we have to deal with sometimes to try to get people to talk and to give us this information. One of the people that I've known for many, many years after I first moved here used to be a probation department here. I finally bothered him enough to get him and his wife Jessie, both of who are veterans, to finally get me some information on him that I put out there. And she brought his medals today, even though he didn't want to bring them, and that just is the kind of people that we normally see. Jim Coker didn't go to school here and wasn't born in Trinity County, but he got here just as quick as he could once he found out that we existed. He flew over 280 combat missions in Vietnam as a forward air controller. Received Air Medal with 10 Oak Leaf clusters, which is the equivalent of 11 Air Medals. He received Distinguished Flying Cross with 3 Oak Leaf clusters, which is the same as 4 Air Medals. Received gallantry crosses from the Republic of Vietnam with a bronze and a silver star, and a Korean merit. And Jim, would you stand up? You wouldn't know he could have fit in a little plane when you look at him. Those planes were unarmed, and what he would normally do is he would fly missions in support of ground troops, and he'd mark enemy positions with flares and rockets so that the fighters could come in and give our soldiers protection and what I think the Vietnamese call an unfair advantage.
What did they mark him with?
What they marked him with? They marked him with as much small orange fire as they could direct towards him. So I appreciate him. If you all get a chance, you might come and look at this. This is pretty impressive. His daddy was the superintendent here at the Groveton Schools for a number of years. Dan Barnes has been working for years doing history research and going to graveyards, and he's written a couple of books for the Trinity Historical Society. One is called Heroes in the Mist, Obituary of the Dead of World War II from the dead city of Trinity, Texas. And the other book he wrote expanded it out into the whole county, called the County of Valor. These are basically out of print, but hopefully copies can be made. I asked Dan to come today. He's been trying to get information to help do a similar project with the Vietnam War veterans. And I would encourage you to get people to try to work with him, get him information, because nobody else knows the history that the veterans know and what they went through. And as we continue to get photographs and memorabilia from people, I hope to eventually fill this wall on the outside here as well. People that come here for jury duty, and Judge Jones can tell you this, a lot of the people don't have any clue of why they get to come and be on a jury. People that come to court don't have any clue why they have the right to go to court and have their grievances aired by impartial judges. And if not for the veterans that we have, those rights would be lost. So I would welcome Mr. Barnes up here and let him talk to you a little bit about his research. Everybody knows him as Bubba. Technically, it's Dan.
If you can't hear me, let me know. Sometimes people can't. In fact, have trouble, there's seats up here, you can come up here, since we don't have a microphone. I treated the judge pretty bad on this. He wrote me a letter some months ago wanting me to speak, and I don't mind really speaking in public, but I really didn't feel qualified. I'm not a veteran, oddly enough, even though chronicling veterans in Trinity County is sort of my passion. But I was raised by one, and anyway, a couple of the other veterans kept hammering at me, and I hadn't made up my mind to even be here until Friday, and they finally talked me into it. Still didn't know what I was going to talk about, so when I got a problem like that, I get on my tractor and I start driving around doing something. And for some reason, you get sort of a catharsis on my tractors. So it occurred to me what I could do that might be meaningful to people here. Some of you knew this man. Some of you have heard of, others have heard of him. He's dead now. But it's the most meaningful military experience that my family had. It came out of World War II. Very few people know anything about this. Daddy never has mentioned, your father's never talked about it, which I think is a shame. Quite frankly, I think veterans owe the next generation an explanation. They owe them the reality. But anyway, I was lucky enough to live with Daddy and company long enough for him to open up about this incident. And before he died, I was part of it too at the end, but I got to see him come to grips with it finally. And so this, I thought I'd tell you about this. This is very personal. I may start crying part of the way through it. Daddy was a doctor. He'd been back in Trinity County about 3 years, and the war broke out, World War II. Talked it over with my mother. He didn't have to go in then, but he went in very early in the spring of '42. He told a story about his basic training. He said it lasted 1 hour. He said they lined us up. Everybody was either a doctor or a dentist. And they had some 30-year Marine going to teach them how to march. He said an hour later they gave up. So there was a complete catastrophe. And he said they dismissed us, go do medicine, go do dentistry. People don't understand that aspect of World War II. They had 25 million men and women to process. Daddy was one day giving shots. He said he loved Navy corpsmen for all his life. He thought they were great. And anyway, they would come up with trays full of shot needles. Everything was loaded. This was before you had the thing where you get 18 shots at one time. And we put a tray down, and you'd have it. You wouldn't even see the end of the line. Wham. And he said you wouldn't even look at them. You'd go next, and he'd do that for hours and hours and hours. Anyway, like I said, he had no basic training. When he got overseas, he had never fired a gun. Of course, it never killed anybody. Of course, in medicine, he had been exposed to a lot of what we call gore. But anyway, next thing he knows, he's in, somebody may have heard of Joe Foss, the Marine ace. Well, he ended up in Joe Foss's outfit. And they were the 2nd Marine Fighter Unit to go to Guadalcanal. Next thing Daddy knows, he and his best friend, another doctor, are flying to Guadalcanal, who neither one of them ever heard of it. He had an interesting incident when he arrived. He went into the tent to check in, and there was this enlisted man signing everybody in. He asked Daddy his name. So he looked down and found the name. But while he was doing that, he reached down, grabbed something, laid it in front of Daddy on the table. It was a 45 and a web belt with ammunition and a canteen. Daddy's looking at it. With the other hand, he reaches down and grabs a Springfield 1903 with a bandolier, a bayonet, lays it on the gun. Daddy finally had enough of this. He says, "Who's that for?" He says, "That's for you." Daddy said, "Oh no, I'm a non-combatant." The guy looks him right in the eyes and said, "Bub, there ain't no non-combatants on this island." Well, 2 weeks later, he found out what the guy was talking about. He got there on October the 1st. The war had been going on there for 2.5 months, and the issue was still in doubt. And on the night of the 13th and 14th, Japanese finally showed up to blow the island away. And he was in a slip trench with the rest of them. And what ensued is considered the most intense bombardment of its type in the entirety of World War II. It went on for 2 hours. Everything from all this was naval rifles. It went on 5-inch, which the Army would have known as an 88. That's about the same size. The Germans are famous for their 88s. Everything from 5-inch up to 14. The shells were this wide. His best friend was killed. They basically lost the entire Air Force. The Japanese, of course, it was dark, and they were trying to find the airfield, which was the key to the whole battle, for the entirety of the battle. And they had moved the non-combatants next to the airfield where they thought everything was safe. So not only was he on the engagement, he was at ground zero. And they, like I said, they lost, airfield was inoperable at daylight. Air Force was just about completely gone. They had 40 men killed and several hundred wounded. One of his veterans friends told me, I guess he must have talked to Daddy about it, said one of the things he did was walk the length of Henderson Field picking up body parts. That'll give you some idea of what went on. Anyway, he survived everything and got to New Hebrides, and he wrote my brother, who was 1.5 years old, a letter describing what had happened that night. I've read a lot of stuff on World War II. I've never read anything quite like this. Part of it is a doctor's description of what happens to you under fire. And I'm sitting there reading this one time, and I'm thinking, who is he talking about? Is it the guy next to him, or is it him? Because he talks about the things that you do, and physiological things, dealing with the fear. Anyway, the point of this is he never got over this. For the rest of his life, this incident kept coming up. And I found out later that part of it was fear. I've never been under fire, so I can't say what you actually, what somebody under fire actually does. But fear was always tied in with this event when he would mention it. And I read a long time ago that psychological disorders, which PTSD is one of them, the root of most of them are fear and shame. And I came to the conclusion that what we were dealing with was a man who was ashamed of how fearful he got. He got so he told me he got so frightened. You just couldn't get any more frightened than that. Anyway, he came back. I had a cousin a few years older than I was. Remembers him when she was like 3 or 4, went into the service. She said the same man did not come back. You know, a little kid would notice this more than another. Although my mother noticed it too. He came out very tough, very hard. That's the man I knew. And but again, this event, every once in a while it would come up. He credited his survival with being lucky enough to be in company on the island with 6 or 7 career Marines. We call them the old breed. A lot of them were Mustangs by that time. They had made it into the sergeantry. And anyway, they needed officers. So his best friend was Lieutenant George Cole. And they took care of Daddy. And I asked him one time, I finally got to meet George, and I said, what do you think about having Daddy in there in the tent with you? He said, well, we took care of him because he was a doctor, and he'd take care of us. So anyway, things bumped along until 1992. Daddy got thrown back in. That's 50 years after the first year of the war. And I was in on an incident relative to this, and he went to pieces when confronted with his past in public. And I think George Cole was with us. Luckily, we were able to control things, but it was awful and very embarrassing for him. And anyway, a couple of weeks later, man, did any of you remember Brady Wadsworth? He used to run Southland's Woodland Division. He's mentioned in dispatches from Guadalcanal. He was one of America's early war heroes. And he got shot up so bad that they let him out of service. Went to University of Florida. He was forester and long-term. Shut this very quickly. After a while, he came to Texas and ended up in the South. And a few weeks after this incident, he knew my father. We were all involved in forestry together. He came over to my mother and Daddy's house and talked Daddy into going back to Guadalcanal. I found out about it later in the afternoon. I was absolutely appalled. And so my first response is, well, maybe George Cole can save him again. So George would not let me send him on this trip. It was the 50th anniversary of the battle. But I contacted his friends in San Diego with the Marine base. We concocted a series of lies that stretched from here to Coronado. And we sent George with Daddy and Mr. Wadsworth. And they all went back and had a great time. Anyway, they came back. Everything seemed fine. And he was obviously more relaxed. He began to talk about the situation. And I finally asked him, I said, what was the highlight of the trip? Because he'd obviously had a good time. And I didn't know what I was going to get. He said, well, we all wore a campaign badge. And if you don't know anything about the Solomons, the people there are black. I mean, they come out of Melanesia, out of New Guinea. I mean, they're coal black. So you know who you know one from another. You know, if you're not black, you're probably not from the Solomons. But anyway, most of the white guys had badges on. He said the island was lousy with young, obviously Solomon Islanders. And he said you'd be walking around, and this kid, 18 years old, who didn't know you, was 2 or 3 generations from the fighting. He said they'd walk up to you, see that badge, stick out their hand, and say, shake your hand, and they said, thank you. And that was the catharsis he needed. And whatever he had to endure, some people appreciate it. So my message to you is, when you see a veteran, thank you. You owe an awful lot of your freedom, the good things in your life. When the Republic called, they answered the call, regardless of the political situation of the war. And that's one of the reasons I do this. Like I said, I'm working on Vietnam, and the numbers of just World War II, Trinity County lost 2.5 times the national average. World War II. Should have lost 25, he lost 78. And I include, especially in this one, several of them that were captured by the Japanese who survived. I refer to them as members of the living dead. So, but same thing in Vietnam, it's going to be at least twice the national average. Korea was at least twice the national average. So when the bugle blows, Trinity County shows up. And one of the ironies of what I'm doing, these people are not going to be forgotten. It's one thing to die for your country. It's another thing to die for your country and be forgotten. And ironically, these people will be remembered longer than I would. And I wrote the article. So, but I need help on Vietnam. I got people that I can't place them in Trinity County. I got one guy. The paper announces he's in Trinity County, and then it's a paper up near Longview, and then they don't tell me why he's from Trinity County. His picture's out there. So I'm gonna have to drive to White Oak and see if I can find his family and find out what his connection is with Trinity County. But just like World War II, these guys all have an interesting story to tell. They were everywhere. They got killed everywhere you could get killed. It's been an education for me. Among other things, I had an extremely high draft number. 366 was as high as you could have in the first lottery, and I had 342. But if you didn't go, you had to follow the war through the news. And until I got into this, I had no idea how distorted the reporting was. I thought Vietnam was flat. I thought it was all rice paddies, because that, with occasionally some jungle, you know. Turns out it's mostly mountainous. And I've had an eye-opener. Probably the Trinity County expert on Agent Orange. It's a fascinating story. Actually, after I got through with what I was doing, the government actually comes out better than they made a mistake. But if you read the whole story, it wasn't like they were just stupid. They didn't quite understand the stuff they were spraying. My father told me you could buy it over the counter at the cattle place back in the 50s. You could buy it over the counter. Most of the stuff that was really dangerous. And last night I was working on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. That was an eye-opener. It's not a trail, it's 10,000 miles of trails and roads. And all these guys that died, they were involved in some form of trying to, the Allies to cope with all of it. And cope with Washington trying to cope with it. But if you do any of these people, I need some help. I've got 3 or 4 contacts, and then basically nothing. And I got 2 of them buried side by side, and named Freeman out here at Thornton Cemetery, and I can only place one of them in Trinity County, and yet he's buried here. So that's the kind of stuff you run into. And some of them we don't know exactly. I notice on what's outside, they don't know where they were killed. I try to get family information, where they went to school, any personal information I can find, and then the unit history and stuff like that, and up to where they were wounded. And there were 4 that we can claim from Trinity, the city, and I'm probably the only person alive to do all 4 of them. It's been 50 years now. But that's what I'm doing. This is what I've done, and the Vietnam thing is what I'm doing. So I appreciate any help.
Richard back here also, he needs to give me some stuff. He used to arrest people. He says. Anyway, get with Dan. If you know people, the veterans I've always met never want to talk about it. But as he said, if we don't get this information, it's going to die out with this generation. And my dad's generation there's very few World War II people left. So if you know people and you've got some stuff that you would like to put on this wall forever, get it to us. And